Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Royal Watcher podcast. My name is Saad Salman. I'm the founder and editor of the Royal Watcher, a royal commentator, and a royal contributor for alt.com.
And my name is Sam Gillespie. I am the editor of the Beau Monde. I have a background in fine jewelry and a long-held fascination with history and royalty.
And today we're joined by a very special repeat guest who's appeared on the podcast quite a few times before. Jakob, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello again. My name is Jakob. I'm not a professional blogger or anything, but I've still managed to weasel myself my way into the podcast for the third time. I've had an interest in the Scandinavian royals mainly for all my life, I think. And yeah, that's about it. I'm not a professional. I'm just very good at remembering things I've heard and I've read. So hopefully I have something to add to this episode.
Well, we all love an enthusiastic amateur, Jakob, so welcome.
Welcome. So yeah, today's episode is all about the Nobel Prize Ceremony that happened in Sweden for the first time in 3 years in the proper form, which is white tie and tiaras, and kind of, I call it really the best time of the year.
Oh, it's like early Christmas.
Yeah,
Definitely,
I must say, one thing I do admire the Scandinavians, not just the Swedish, but also the Danish, is, when they have a tiara event, they do it properly.
They do. Most of them, at least.
Yes, and we have lots of views on that. But before we start, we're going to kind of discuss a bit of the background with the Nobel Prizes and how kind of it developed. So yeah, it was, I think, in the early 1900s that Alfred Nobel left a large grant for really awards to be given in fields of physics, English, chemistry, kind of scientific, and medicine, all sorts of fields in that form. And the prizes have been awarded in Oslo as well after the Swedish-Norwegian kingdom split, where the Peace Prize is awarded, and in Stockholm is where all the rest of the prizes are awarded.
Yeah, Alfred, he had this idea that because, the union had been crumbling for decades. So he had this idea that if the awards were shared between Oslo and Stockholm, maybe the two brother peoples, as at least the Swedes called them, they could get along. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But we've managed to remain peaceful ever since.
Yeah, no, and it's very interesting. We're kind of talking about the dress code aspect of it, and also let's kind of begin with talking about the functions, because in Norway, the royal family just have an observational role, where in Sweden, the king himself presents the prizes. So that's kind of a difference in stuff, and also whereas in Stockholm, the event is all white tie and kind of gala. In Norway, it's suit and tie, and then in the evening they have a black tie banquet, but it's really varying levels of formality for each event.
Yes, and I don't know if that's been the case all along, and I don't really know how they because the prizes were first awarded in 1901. And the union split in 1905. So I don't know if a Swedish royal traveled to Oslo to hand out the Peace Prize, or if it was made by a governor or whatever we had over there. So I don't really know why, but I'm not surprised that the Swedish royals have had it as a white tie event, because they've always been a bit more pompous than the Norwegian royal family.
Definitely. Yeah, no. And I think one of the interesting things is like you're talking that we don't really know about the early prizes. And apart like before the 90s, I can't really recall seeing any pictures of the Norwegian royals at the prizes at all. So we don't really know if it used to be kind of a white tie event and it kind of got downgraded, or it's kind of always been like that. Whereas in Sweden, I think it used to be a white tie event, but they didn't wear tiaras until around the mid 1930s. So before
Oh,
that, it was just a tiara-less kind of event, and now they just wear tiaras. So that was a
okay.
development a couple of years into the prize.
Okay, because I remember having seen photos from somewhere in the mid 1900s where the ladies aren't wearing a tiara, but it was specified in the comments that it was because the court was in mourning for someone.
Yeah, that's kind of such an interesting development where like they kind of changed the dress code halfway through, and hopefully that kind of change is permanent, and we don't really get a downgrade of the dress code as kind of events would suggest.
Oh, I'll turn Republican if they change the
And then kind of beginning with the star of the show, which is Queen Sylvia, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, her looks have been the Nobels are the highlight looks of her entire year, and as always, she did not disappoint. I think in this part, we're just going to focus on the gown for all of those seeing on YouTube can follow along as well. That she wore this really spectacular lace gown with this silk satin kind of overskirt, and it's quite a
Mhm.
striking look for her.
It is, and she always tries to wow us at the Nobels. And she's also had a rule for many years that the dress worn for the Nobels shouldn't be a new one. It should have been one that she had worn earlier during the year. But to my knowledge, we've seen a few times in the later years that she's worn new dresses for the Nobels, and I don't remember ever having seen this one.
Yes, I think it's new. I mean, our friend Sarah Williams, who's the big expert on Swedish royal family, she could tell us all about it.
Mm.
I mean, Sylvia's had a really good run of gowns and tiaras this year. She's had quite a few amazing looks. And I wonder if it's by her usual, who I believe is called Georg D. Arend, but I can't really find, I don't think it's been identified yet. But the look, as
No.
I think it's so suitable for her, and it's kind of very regal and becoming.
Yes, it is, and the color matching between the jewels and the dress. I mean, it's not a match, but they suit so well together. And it's she's spectacular. She's really mastered the art of making a statement with her whatever she's wearing.
Definitely, yeah. She always looks so regal and spectacular. And then and for the past few years, Queen Sylvia has usually alternated between the nine-pronged tiara and the Leutenberg sapphires. But
Yes.
this year, she returned to the Swedish Napoleonic amethyst parure, which she used
Mhm.
to wear for the prizes a couple of times in the 80s and I think the 90s as well. But it's been quite frequently worn, the tiara, this year.
And I had a thought about her choice of tiara because I think we've seen in the last, well, since the pandemic slowed down, that she's worn more tiaras that she hadn't in her usual rotation before the pandemic. She wore
Oh,
the
yeah.
cameos, and I wonder if it's because of her age. I mean, she's an elderly lady.
She's going to be
Her
80 next year.
Yes, and she broke her shoulder a few years ago, and after that, we started seeing her wearing shawls all the time. And elderly ladies that fall and break something, it takes a long time for them to heal. So instead of wearing the Leuchtenberg sapphires or Queen Sophia's tiara, maybe this one isn't as heavy.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, if you look at the background, it originally used to be a necklace that Queen
Mm.
Sylvia herself was kind of instrumental in turning into a tiara back in the 1970s. And it's one of those pieces that I think is most tied to her legacy. But you're right in that she is wearing a lot of lighter pieces, though at the same time, she did wear the Braganza tiara for the Dutch state visit a few weeks ago. So it's not all kind of light and nice
No,
pieces.
but I think a state banquet, how long can that take? 3 hours
Yeah.
maximum. And
Where the
here,
Nobel is off, like
it's a
often
long
gone.
night. It's a long night.
Yes,
And she's also said that we could talk more about later, but that the pronger, as people tend to call it, is very heavy and it's very difficult to wear. And I'd imagine that a circlet like this, or whatever you call it, it's more comfortable.
yeah, definitely. Like I think it's one of those pieces that she really chose for comfort because I think they are like for someone who's covering the event, like it took almost all day, just like from the moment they arrived to the moment they left. Like it was exhausting for me, and I can't even
Mhm.
imagine how they were feeling like being a part of it and being fully dressed up and on show the entire time.
Yes, and she must have worn that tiara for at least 9 hours, if not longer. So as much as I like it when they pile jewels on, I can imagine that it can't be that comfortable to wear many of them.
Definitely. What were your thoughts on this appearance, Sam?
Excuse me, sorry. I've always been a great fan of Queen Sylvia. I mean, as I say, they do it right. They do it right in Sweden. You know, if they're gonna go to a gala, they're gonna do it, correctly. Big dresses, big tiaras, big jewels. And for people who don't know, the Swedish royals actually have one of the most historic collections of tiaras because their family name is Bernadotte. And for people who
Mhm.
don't know, General Bernadotte was a general under Emperor Napoleon of France, and he was elected to be the Crown Prince of Sweden. It's very complicated. Wikipedia will explain it all. Um, but a lot of their jewelry does come from the Napoleonic period. And they also have very close ties with the other Scandinavian monarchies. And also, I believe, with Russia. I think one or two Grand Duchesses might have married in, or their descendants married into the Swedish royal family. So their jewels are, like I say, one of the most historic collections within the royal houses of Europe. So it's always wonderful when they do have these events because you get to see these amazing pieces that you wouldn't necessarily see in other royal families, perhaps. And another thing to maybe mention is that the Swedish royals have what's known as the Swedish Royal Jewelry Foundation. And what it is they put these jewels into this foundation, and therefore these jewels cannot be sold, and they cannot really be passed down via inheritance. They're just mainly owned by the Swedish royal family. So, as much as, yes, you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see Princess Madeline wearing it, Princess Victoria, Princess Sophia. These jewels can be worn by other members of the royal
Mhm.
family, but they cannot leave, which I would love it if every royal family did it, because that way it's a way of preserving the history and preserving the tradition, and that these wonderful pieces that some of them must be nearly 200 plus years old now, but they're
Um,
still they're still worn and they can still be seen at these brilliant events.
yeah, this amethyst parure is believed to have been made in around 1805 for Empress Josephine of France. So it's old.
It's
It's
very
really
old,
old.
and
Indeed.
that's it's one of the things. One of the reasons I love jewelry, and the reason I write the blog and do what I do is because I love seeing these pieces. These beautiful artistic pieces that, yes, they can sit in a museum, but the fact that they're worn and they're meant to be worn, and you're meant to see them. And like as I say, the Swedish royal family are one of the ones that still carry on this tradition, and it's amazing.
Mm. And
Yeah.
what's amazing about the Bernadotte jewels, I think they have two family foundations where for the jewels. And what's amazing is that the collection could have been double the size, maybe triple the size, if it hadn't been for a few inheritances by a few princesses who married into other royal families during the 1800s. So it's big now, but it could have been
Even more
immensely
massive.
bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
think most of the Danish royal collection comes from Sweden as well. So,
and the
yeah.
Norwegians as well.
and the Norwegians, yeah.
So yeah, if only they'd put in this foundation about 100 years ago. I mean,
The Danes
oh,
and the Norwegians would not have much left.
no, they really wouldn't.
And I
No,
think one of
and
the, yes, continue, Jacob.
no, sorry,
That's all right.
you go on.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that Sam was in Paris this week and went to the Louvre. And one of the good parts, like she was talking that we could see all these jewels in person, is that if it weren't for kind of family inheritances, like this could have very well been exhibited at the Louvre, but instead it's still being worn and it's a part of kind of living history.
Yes, very
Yeah.
much so. And I mean, if anyone does go to the Louvre, the pieces are fantastic. But if you consider, what the French jewelry collection would have been, there's really only about six pieces left, and they've all been
Mm.
dispersed. And as I say, I love seeing these jewels being worn as they're meant to be. But a lot of the time, when these things get sold, they end up in private collections, and they just go into safes, and that's where they stay. They never see the light of day again, which is really tragic. But thank God the Swedes aren't like that.
And I do love the versatility of the necklace, but I have to say that on Queen Sylvia, I would really kind of like it to be maybe a link or two bigger. They could add a diamond collet or two at the back because it
Yeah.
kind of she's suffering from what I call the Queen Camilla syndrome now, in which like her necklace is a bit too short and looks like it's choking her. When I saw, I mean, Jacob and I were both outside the Royal Theatre in Copenhagen when Queen Sylvia wore the amethyst there, but the necklace looked so much more even back then. So it's kind of looks a bit tighter. So I wonder if maybe took one or two more elements off than usual.
Mm.
Mm.
But also,
Um,
maybe if it was a little bit longer, it might have caught on the neckline.
Oh, that's true.
I was just
Yeah.
me saying this, having absolutely no idea about fashion or anything, but just going, oh, no, no, maybe it would have caught.
um, Another thing that I'd just like to mention is that she's wearing, well, like all the members of the royal family, the queen is wearing the insignia of the Order of the Seraphim, which is the premier order of Sweden. And she's the only one who's wearing a brilliant cut encrusted diamond star that she received when she married the king in 1976. I think we can see it there, and that's the only. And it used to belong to Queen Victoria of Sweden, and she received it in 1908, and she was the first woman ever to
Given the
be
seraphim.
yes, to become a member of the Order of the Seraphim, because the female members aren't knights; they are only members. And it was her husband, Gustav V, who, when he became king in 1907, he felt that at least his wife, the queen, should be a member. And she was the only female member for many, many years until the the rules of the order was changed in 1952, after which all the royal princesses also became members of the order.
Yeah, fascinating. I didn't know at all about the Diamond Star. And then we move on to Crown Princess Victoria, who was wearing what is kind of one of my least favorite tiaras in the Swedish royal collection, the 6-button tiara.
Yeah,
However,
me too.
shout out to our friend Sarah Williams, who loves the tiara and it's her favorite tiara. So can't say all that much about it.
Yeah, I mean, from what I know, I mean, I could be wrong because I really only watched that Swedish documentary once with the English subtitles. Those buttons are a remnant from King Oscar. I think we can see in the bottom right-hand corner. If you're watching on YouTube, they're actually on his crown. And I don't, if maybe you guys know why they were taken off the crown. I don't know, but yeah, if you've got some diamond buttons hanging around.
They were added to the old crown of King Eric XIV. That was made for his coronation in 1560, I think.
Oh.
And they were added by King Carl Johan, who you mentioned before, who was elected a crown prince. And when he was for his coronation in 1818, he felt that the old crown needed more bling. So he added. I don't know if he had, he had some kind of minority complex or something.
Well, I mean, if you've just come from the court of Napoleon, you'd be like, yeah, we need to zhuzh this up a bit.
and then it was worn by the 3 kings that came after him. And King Oscar was the last Swedish king to be crowned in the 1870s, I think. And then and he wore the crown for every year for the ceremonial opening of Parliament. And then after he died, his son chose not to have a coronation. And they decided that the crown needed to be restored because it was old, it was a bit wonky, and then they decided to restore it to its original shape. And when they had all these buttons, his wife, King Gustav's wife, Queen Victoria, she started. I don't think she drew it herself, but she had people make a suggestion how you could incorporate all these buttons into a tiara. But she moved abroad, took a few lovers, and her husband stayed in Stockholm and took a few lovers. So they never got around to making the tiara until the 1970s when Princess Lilian married into the family. And I think she was the first one who wore it.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and the buttons, they weren't property of King Carl Johan. It wasn't something that he had brought from France, because as we can see on the little picture of the elderly lady, that's Queen Lovisa Ulrika, who belonged to the old Swedish royal family.
Oh.
And it's believed that those buttons she's wearing are some of the buttons that has been used for the 6-button tiara.
Wow, so they're very old then.
Yes, and I've read somewhere, but I can't remember, that at least some of them came from her mother. What was her name? I have it written down here. Queen Sophia Dorothea in Prussia. And she was the daughter of George the First.
Yeah.
So If
That's
they are,
very
if they
long
were,
historical provenance. Yeah.
yes, and I think they must be the oldest jewels in use in the Swedish royal family.
Mm.
Right. So a lot more respect for the buttons.
All right, yeah, we take it back. We take it back.
But the
No,
tiara is
yeah.
still horrible.
Yeah, I think the base of everything, like it's like Queen Victoria was kind of scribbling hurriedly before she left Sweden, and she kind of maybe should have taken a bit more time to think it all out.
Yeah, it just looks to me like they've mashed 3 diamond bracelets together to form a base, and
Yeah.
and pop them on top, and it's
And also, if this is the design of Queen Victoria, we have to remember that at the time they were made, the design was made, the ladies had these big poofy Edwardian hairdos where you could hide the base
Oh yeah,
better.
rather than this sort of monstrosity that we see before us now. Victoria usually has pretty flat hair, and her hair was quite nice for the Nobel, so I won't say her about that. Though, I mean, her gown was something else. It's by your favorite designer, Jakob.
Camilla Collin, one of my favorite Swedish designers. I just think she's, if I were a lady, I'd wear dresses by her or clothes by her.
Yeah, no, and it was quite a striking piece. She usually really goes all out for the Nobels. And along with the 6-button tiara, she was wearing the 2 diamond buttons that we see also in the pictures you're watching on YouTube. One on her sash and one on her inside her bun on the back of her head, as well as the Vasa diamond earrings, which in the past, and that same Swedish Royal Jewels documentary, Victoria said that she doesn't really dare to wear them, but she has worn them a couple of times.
Oh yeah, yes. I remember that bit.
She's lying to us.
Yeah, and also there's this kind of colored diamond necklace, which I think you were telling us that it is an 18th birthday gift that she may have gotten from Prince Bertil and Princess Lilian.
No, not 18th birthday. That was me and Sarah speculating. But I read in one Swedish newspaper and one Swedish ladies magazine that covered the Nobels, that they were a gift from her great uncle, Prince Bertil, and his wife, Princess Lilian. And then I think Sarah Williams said that the first time she had worn them was in 1995. And that could match with her
18th birthday.
18th birthday.
Yeah. But no, it's definitely a really striking piece. I mean, the design is quite this with the color of the stone looks quite modern, but if you look at it in detail, the setting is really quite antique.
So do we know what the gemstones are?
I'm not sure. I believe it's been alternatively called either sapphires or colored diamonds. I'd kind of lean more towards the sapphire route.
Yeah, because if they were colored diamonds, that
would be worth a fortune.
An absolute fortune.
But it's an interesting pairing with kind of the most historic royal jewels, if you think about the button tiara and the Vasa earrings to her, something like that.
And the Vasa earrings, they were given to Queen Victoria, or the future Queen Victoria, by her cousin, Queen Carola of Saxony, who was a granddaughter of the Swedish king that was deposed to make room for the Bernadottes. So it was a significant, both their name and their origins was a bit of a peace offering, maybe, from one cousin to another, to signify that, the Vasas are back.
In earring form, at least.
Yes, and Queen Victoria was
through the bloodline.
Queen Victoria was also a great granddaughter of the deposed king. So it was
very symbolic in kind of all senses.
Yes, exactly. Hi. And Victoria was also wearing the the zigzag diamond bracelet, which is one of several big bracelets, diamond bracelets in the Bernadotte family. And it was originally a choker that belonged to Grand Duchess Louise of Baden, who was the mother of Queen Victoria that we talked about before.
Yeah, so no, it's another one of those really historic pieces, but it looks quite modern. I'm afraid our slideshow, for those watching on YouTube, does not really have a good picture of the bracelet.
I can cut one instead, don't worry.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, no, it's quite a lovely historical piece, and I mean, also ties into that whole kind of Prussian heritage that they have.
Yes. And
And then
Victoria.
yeah, you can.
No, sorry.
Yeah, and then I'll say moving on to Princess Sophia, who debuted a new version of her tiara with topazes this time.
It's her fifth version.
Yes,
I thought
it's
they were
quite.
aquamarines.
No, well, we're not necessarily entirely sure kind of what the stones are, but the earrings were topazes, and that was confirmed by the jeweler to our friend Sarah, and we can only assume because they're also brulette cut, like the stones in the tiara, that they are also topazes.
Oh,
But I
okay.
mean, our initial thought was aquamarines, and that's kind of what we went with, but we can't really be sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, so Sophia debuted this tiara on her wedding day in 2015 with emeralds. Then it got a bit of a makeover until 2017 when I believe she wore the diamond version first, and then
Yeah,
she
I
wore
think
the
so.
one with pearls. And then turquoises were debuted at the 2019 Nobels, and now topazes. So it's quite a versatile piece.
Yeah, it's also quite horrible in my opinion. But but if you want to call it versatile, go ahead.
No,
Um,
actually, I'm afraid I did an article on the tiara this month and I kind of fell in love with it. I like the design of it, works pretty well. It's quite modern, but it suits Sophia as long as her hair is all right, which is kind of 50-50 at times. But
and
I
that,
like it for itself, but the fact that she isn't wearing any historic heirloom tiaras for the past few years, that is kind of the reason where I'm kind of starting to dislike it.
yeah, and her as you said, if her hair is all right, and unfortunately, it's more often not all right than all right because you can see it float like a centimeter or something above her hair. Um, and I don't like that. I don't like it when the base of a tiara is showing.
Yeah, I don't like that either. And also, I mean, I'll give her this. At least it's the same color as her hair because some of those bases are just really off.
Yeah.
No,
Um,
if I
it,
mean, from my perspective, if she's only gonna have one tiara, I mean, this is a lovely tiara to have because of the fact that there's so many uses, and it's
mm,
not an attractive design in that sense, and it does look much better after kind of the reshaping of it than it did like when she wore it at her wedding when it was like flat, and then she also wore her hair really weird and flat as well, so it looked awful in those days.
yes, yes.
Yeah,
And
I
and
mean,
they must have reframed it completely or something.
mm,
Yeah, Sam
yeah.
is a jewelry expert here who can tell us.
I love the way you say, I can tell you, like I have any
Yeah.
insight to what the Swedish jeweler gets
Now
up
you
to.
were there.
I was there,
That's
yes. Me and Berlin, we were just like discussing what we should do with this tiara. No, probably what's happened is they've put it on a more flexible base. I mean, just maybe sort of
Mm,
studying it from the pictures. I would surmise, as this is a new piece, it probably is a necklace that's been converted. That's what happens with a lot of these old
mm,
tiaras and new tiaras. So, as you can see in her wedding pictures, it's very stiff, very upright, and not really, doesn't look fantastic. But what they might have done is they might have put it on a more flexible banding as we can see on the picture on the right, if you're watching on YouTube. So therefore, it's more curved around her head. So you get more of like a halo effect, like the old-fashioned Russian kokoshnik tiaras. But yeah, just looking at if you're watching YouTube, picture on the far left is the wedding tiara, picture on the far right is the Nobel one. And as you can see, the base of the tiara has been made more flexible to maybe just go around her head. And like Sad said, I'm a big fan of multi-purpose jewels. So the fact that the tops of this tiara are interchangeable is one of the reasons that I quite like it. I mean, I'm not a fan of the like the palm tree motif. It's quite, looks a bit like the lotus tiara of Great Britain. I'm not a particularly big design fan of that. But yeah, the fact that you can interchange it, I like that kind of thing.
I wonder if because as we've said before, Sylvia knows how to wear jewels. And the tiara is said to have been a wedding gift from Sylvia and Carl Gustav. And it's said to have been a necklace, as you said, and it was a gift from a Thai prince or Thai royal.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, but I wonder if the way it was worn at the wedding was that they tried to make it into a Swedish bridal crown or something similar to a Swedish bridal crown. And it could have worked if she had worn her hair differently.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, it's not the worst wedding tiara I've ever seen. I think the Westminster tiara beats that one. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's a little bit it's too far, it's too small to be that far back on the head, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, it's all about the placement. I mean, if for those who are watching the one with the pearls, I think she really hit the head on the nail for that one. Like it was perfect the way kind of it was framing. It was far in front that it looked proper, whereas in most of their pictures it looked like it's wearing her rather than her wearing it, which is like not really the thing for such a tiny piece.
Yeah, and I actually think that the pearl version is my favorite. The pearl version or the all diamond version.
Yeah. No, it's a nice piece, but if Sophia, if you're listening, we need you to wear something else now.
Come on,
And then, yeah, and in addition to kind of all the other the main Swedish royals, we also got some extended members of the royal family, starting with Princess Christina, the king's sister, who's wearing the historic Connaught diamond tiara.
Yes, and it was a wedding gift from her great grandparents, the Duke and Duchess of Connaught, to their daughter Margaret when she married the Swedish Crown Prince Gustav Adolf in 1905.
Yeah. And it's like such a kind of intricate piece, which has just lovely detailing. And Christina actually wore the tiara on her wedding day. So
Yeah,
she has quite a long history with it.
And because her mother had died less than a year before, or a year before, so she wanted to have something of hers with her on her wedding day.
Which is a lovely, sweet gesture.
And then she and her sisters insisted on that the Queen Sylvia, it should be the first tiara worn by Queen Sylvia. So she wore it on for the celebrations and the ball on the night before her marriage to the king in 1976.
Wasn't that the ball that ABBA did they first perform Dancing Queen, or did they give it to Queen Sylvia as a tribute?
No, it was the first time. It was the first time that they performed Dancing Queen at the Royal Opera, and after that there was a big ball at Tottenham Palace. And there are some fantastic footage of the ABBA ladies dressed up as 17th century noblewomen doing the disco on the stage.
Yes, that's
which
what I
is quite
remember it
fun.
from.
all of that footage and footage from the ball and the royal guests who attended, all on the Royal Watcher. Shameless plug.
And the tiara was made by, I think it's a British jeweler called Wolf and Company.
Who are still in
Um,
business, who I really need to contact because I want to see their ledgers.
ah,
Ooh, that'll be an interesting episode to do later
That would
on
be
the
an interesting Sam going nuts in E Wolf's library.
No, it's actually I liked kind of Christina's whole look for the Nobels is I
mhm.
mean her own tiara got stolen a few years ago. She's usually in the sixth button. And this is kind of a change. She wore the Connaught earlier this year for the Dutch state visit, but this is kind of the first time she worn it for the Nobels in a long time. And seeing it with kind of this butterfly caftan and everything, it gave me such a laid back kind of vibe. Like she was comfortable, she was in family heirlooms and a boatload of jewels, but she looked like she was having the time of her life.
She was there to have fun.
Yeah, no, definitely one of my favorite royals.
Yeah, and she's also wearing something. She's also wearing the long golden chain that you can see. She's wearing the King's Medal of the 12th size with brilliance in a chain for great non-profit social contributions in several fields. And she got it a few years ago, and no, last year, and she is only the second person ever to receive that medal. So it's
And it's
It's a
hidden
very
behind her sash.
important.
How annoying.
It's a very.
yes,
I wonder. No, even in the other picture, it's not that visible. So, and this is like one of the. I think the second time we've seen her wear it. She wore it at the Dutch banquet and then now. So
yeah,
quite a
because
special one.
I don't think, I mean, there were no Nobels last year, and I'm not sure that she received. There was a medal ceremony, so that she received it this year, even though it was for the 2021. I'm not sure, but she hasn't had many.
Chances to wear it.
Um, no, exactly.
Yeah, no. And then also kind of a surprise kind of royal adjacent for us was Countess Madeleine Bernadotte. And I
Mhm.
can't pronounce her current last name, so I'll leave that up to you, Jacob.
Well, it's a Greek name, so I can't really pronounce it either. But her married name is Kogevinas, maybe.
Yes, I think we'll go with that.
Yeah,
And I
and
mean, she wore her mother Elsa von Rosen's diamond floral tiara, which is really a lovely piece.
yes, and I actually found out some new info today
Ooh.
from Facebook, of all places. But there's a man called Klaus Mattsson who I think he knows everything there is to know about the Bernadotte jewels. And in a comment under a photo of Countess Madeleine from 2000, from 7 years ago, he writes that the tiara is a family piece from the von Rosen family, and that it belonged at the time, it belonged to Madeleine's brother, Count von Rosen, her half brother, Count von Rosen.
Ooh.
But he died in 2016. So I wonder who owns it today.
Yes, that's interesting. So it never really belonged to her. She was always just loaning it. And she even loaned it to
Yeah.
her stepmother once. So that's an interesting
Mm.
development. But no, I mean, for a woman over 80, she looks absolutely fabulous.
She does. And she is, for the Tidbit fans, she is through her aunts. She is the first cousin of Queen Harald of Norway, and she was the first cousin of King Baudouin and King Albert of the Belgians. And their sister, another first cousin of hers, was the Grand Duchess of Luxembourg. So she's very
Very
well
well
connected.
connected.
Very well
Yeah.
connected.
And her first husband was a Belgian millionaire. So that's where all the
Yeah.
wealth comes from.
Mm.
Definitely one of the most kind of stylish of the Swedish royals. There's a few kind
Yeah.
of older Swedish royal women who are compete in the style wars. It's her, it's Countess Marianne Bernadotte. They both look
Mhm.
fabulous.
And unfortunately, I don't think that we'll ever see Marianne at these celebrations again, because she's a very statuesque lady, and she has a lot of jewels.
Definitely, that's something. I mean, she's in her late 90s now, so
Yes.
I'm afraid we won't see her at the Nobels again. Just a sad thought. But someone who we did see was Countess Bettina Bernadotte, who is she's the granddaughter of King Gustav V.
No, she's the great granddaughter of Gustav V.
Ah, and she's wearing the diamond cufflink tiara, which is one of those weird pieces.
Is it the cufflinks? I thought it was the other one.
I mean, they have two. I know one of them comes from cufflinks. I'm not sure which one. The other one will pop up in a few slides as well. So,
well,
but this is one of those that can appeared in the 70s.
Yeah, and if it is, I think you're right that it is the cufflinks. It's made from cufflinks that belong to King Gustav V.
Yes, and I mean, Sam was talking about kind of Russian Grand Duchesses marrying into the royal family. Her grandmother was Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna the Younger, and she brought a huge kind of cache of Romanov jewels into the Swedish royal family back in the early 1900s before her divorce. And if things had gone differently, right now, Bettina would have been wearing the big kind of emerald Kokoshnik tiara of Grand Duchess Ella, or like even her grandmother's sapphire pearl. So I was just thinking, like, what if kind of the Russian Revolution had not gone that way and she didn't have to sell her jewels?
Yeah, she had some fun. Well, I mean, the thing is, for a Romanov Grand Duchess, she didn't have much, but for anyone else, she had a fantastic collection.
Definitely. And then also a few other ladies who were in tiaras were Countess Anna Hamilton, who's a lady in waiting of Queen Sylvia, who, I mean, me, Jacob. Oh,
she's the first lady of the court. There's apparently a big difference.
Oh, sorry about that. And we were both discussing about kind of her lack of tiara a few weeks ago, proper tiara, and looks like she's been kind of listening into our conversations and she's found herself something nice to wear.
Yeah, good for her.
Good for her. And the other lady, I cannot pronounce her name, so I'll leave that up to you.
On the far left, on the picture, in the, what is it, blue, green dress?
I believe yes, blue, navy blue.
Yeah, is the mistress of the robes, Kirstine von Blixen-Finecke, Baroness von Blixen-Finecke. Her husband's great uncle was married to Karen Blixen, the famous writer. And she's wearing her usual small tiara or a bandeau.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then we discovered something a bit more interesting, is that she is wearing the earrings of the previous Mistress of the Robes.
Yes. And what was her name? The previous Mistress of the Robes was Countess Alice Trolle Wachtmeister. And her husband was the half uncle of Christine's husband. So it's
so it's like a very kind of all a family in the Swedish royal court.
It's a family business, and Anna Hamilton, her grandfather and her great grandfather were both top tier courtiers. So it's really a family business for the nobles.
Definitely, yeah. So quite lovely to see all these appearances. So the best thing about the Nobels for me is we get lovely tiaras on one night, but then the next day, the Swedish king hosts a banquet for all the Nobel laureates at the Royal Palace of Stockholm, which brings even more tiaras.
Yes.
And yeah, one of the more interesting things this year was that and because of the pandemic, we got the laureates from 2020, 2021, and 2022 who posed with the Swedish royal family in kind of separate pictures. And it was a difference from previous years where we've only really gotten one picture of them in the receiving line.
Yes, and it gives us a few more chances to look at the ladies.
Definitely. I mean, we're going to start with Queen Sylvia, who's wearing this really quite striking orange gown, which I
Mm,
believe she debuted at the King's 70th birthday back in 2016. And she
yes, I
wore it
think,
with the pronger, as you were talking about not too long ago, and a bunch of kind of really massive diamonds.
yes. I mean, the Swedish collection is, as Sam said, very large, and they have a shitload of diamonds.
Definitely, yeah, no, they if you look at the size of diamonds in the Riviera and then the huge brooch, which I have a folder on, but I can't remember. I think it dates from kind of Queen Josephina as well. So it's one of those
Mhm.
Napoleonic jewels that's part of the royal family, and it's quite a striking look altogether.
I was trying to find. I had an image in my head, a photo in my head. There's a photo of a box, a black and white photo of a box with the Swedish diamond rivieres and a few of the buttons, and I think there are a few other brooches as well. And I don't know if I'm making things up, but
Now I
maybe
can
one of
picture
the
the box. I know exactly what you're talking about as well.
yeah, and I wonder if this brooch is one of those brooches in the box.
Ooh, that would be interesting. That means it's even older piece than kind of Napoleonic time.
Mm, who knows? They have so many old things.
Oh yeah, no, they have. What did you think about Sylvia's appearance, Sam?
Two things. I've just noticed that her handbag is an oyster shell.
Ooh, I
Oh,
noticed that too.
Literally just noticed that. Very nice. Like it. And the nine prongs tiara, from what I remember from the documentary, that I can't pronounce the name in Swedish and I won't attempt to, that tiara is apparently quite painful to wear, is it not?
yes.
Yes.
And when she first wore it, she nearly passed out, didn't she? Or it was digging into her head so much that she was trying to like discreetly pull her hairpins out.
Yeah. And it was Prince Bertil who kind of
That was
helped her
it.
during the first Nobels back in 1976.
Yeah, but yeah.
I
So
think I think she said that she had like a wound in her head that was like 1 or 2 centimeters deep
Ooh.
from the tiara.
yeah, I mean, this is the thing. As much as the beautiful things, and they must be amazing to wear. I think people have to realize how heavy they must
Mm,
be. Um,
Especially for one of those 9 or 10 hour Nobel Prize events, which is just goes on and on.
Yeah, imagine wearing yourself like a headband that was made out of metal essentially with rocks put on top of it. And if you don't have, as we were discussing earlier, with the headbands that are placed underneath them, if they're not, the reason they're there is to stop this metal,
mm.
colliding with your scalp and making a wound. And if they're not sufficient, then yeah, they can be pretty dangerous things, tiaras.
And one of the things that I found most interesting or most fun in that documentary was that she showed us how the mechanics behind attaching the tiara to her head, because now she really likes to wear it. She's worn it a lot, and she says it's heavy but comfortable. So I find that really interesting, and I like to see tiara from behind.
Mm.
And actually, I've hated this tiara for many years. But when I once saw it photographed from behind, I could suddenly see, the beauty and the intricate details and everything.
Mm. Yeah,
I
I
think
agree.
the kind of hatred of this tiara comes from me being a longtime reader of the late Order of Splendor blog. Used to hate
Yeah,
the tiara and the buttons.
yeah.
That's really kind of formed my opinions on this, and it's it's a lovely piece, And I mean, the diamonds are huge and the design is quite striking, but I think one of the things I don't like about it is how inflexible it looks. And that's kind of one of the reasons
Yeah.
in Sylvia's skull.
And we've from what we've seen that Queen Sylvia has worn it a lot. Queen Louise wore it a lot as well. And Queen Sophia, who we think the tiara was made for, also wore it a lot. But besides them, very few ladies have worn it. So it
It
must be
suits
uncomfortable.
them. Yeah. I think we've had Princess Brigida who's worn it, and also
Yeah.
Princess Lillian, who wore it quite
And,
a few
and
times with the Nobels.
And Birgitta wore it for Crown Princess Victoria's wedding. And you can see in the TV footage from the banquet that she's struggling with it. She's constantly fiddling with it
Yes,
to move it around. So it must have been a long night for poor Birgitta.
definitely. But I mean, Sylvia looked fabulous, and then now we're just gonna move on to Crown Princess Victoria, who was wearing what I call her Kermit dress, which is accurately called the Ellie Saab kind of sequin dress, with the Bernadotte emerald parure and her laurel wreath tiara.
Hmm.
So quite a kind of another historic showing of historic diamonds for her. There was the buttons and the Vasa earrings the previous day, and then the historic Bernadotte emeralds. So she's really digging into the waltz for this Nobels.
Yeah. And she's I mean, the Laura Rep tiara seems to be her go-to tiara.
It's the only one that's personally owned by her as well.
Yes, it
Really?
is.
Yes,
Yes.
because Princess Lillian left it directly to her. So the rest are kind of part of that foundation, but this is hers forever, basically.
Mm.
But I mean, in possibly unpopular opinion, I'm not a fan of its design. It's a necklace. It does not work well as a tiara. There's too much empty space.
Yeah.
It's not cohesive. Like it could use a nice redesign or just use it
Yes.
as a necklace.
Yes. And it's a Boucheron piece originally. And Crown Princess Margareta, who got it as a wedding gift from her grandmother-in-law, Queen Sophia, she wore it as a necklace. I don't think we've had any photos of her wearing it as a tiara.
No. And Princess
No.
Lillian wore it as a necklace a couple of times, but then I think it's now permanently turned into a tiara. But
Mm-hmm.
I would think it wouldn't take too long to kind of reconfigure because as we've seen, the Bernadotte emeralds have been kind of altered a bit recently because the original
Mm-hmm.
pair only included the necklace, I think two brooches. And then in that Swedish Royal Jewels documentary, we saw two additional elements have been taken off from the necklace, which
Yeah.
last year Queen Sylvia debuted as a pair of earrings. So it's now kind of a almost complete pair.
Yeah. And the story goes that it's a belt of King Carl Johan from the beginning, from the, as Sam called it, the splendorous Napoleonic court, where the gentlemen wore jeweled belts. And it's said that Queen Sophia once stitched it together with thread to make a necklace.
Mm.
And
Wow.
I think it was in the documentary that she took some thread and stitched it together, wore it as a necklace a few times, and then Princess Sibylla, who is at the far left of these photos, she was the one who had it made into a real necklace.
Oh, so yeah, no, it's one of those pieces that is so historic, but like so many Jews in the Bernadotte waltz, it's kind of the really only appear like in the past few decades.
Mm,
Yeah, and it keeps on being adapted. So I really like that they still play with even these historic jewels and they're able to kind of alter their function and make them more variable. Because I mean, in the middle picture, you can see that as Queen Sylvia's first appearance with the nine-pronged tiara and the Bernadotte emeralds, which she wore on a state visit to the Netherlands just a few months after her wedding.
mm.
And you can kind of see her in that picture versus her in the picture on the right. that the change in the past kind of 45 years and how much she's developed.
I actually thought that the version we saw at the King's Banquet was my favorite one. I think it suited Victoria well.
Oh, definitely. I think it's one of those jewels that she wears so well, and it's her colors, and it kind of
Mhm.
suits her hairstyle, which is usually really severe in that sense, but it softens out her whole look.
Yes. And I think it went well with her dress, even though I know that you don't like it.
No, I'm not. I mean, I didn't like the first princess dress, which was with the 4-button tiara, but I mean, I like this appearance. Not a fan of this tiara either, but I think it makes a really lovely statement. It's a nice contrast to Victoria's orange and then also Sophia's orange, which was,
Mm.
I mean, our friend Sarah gave us a bit of a warning before the pictures came out that she was going to be wearing orange. And then she was, and I did not expect to do this. I'm kind of rare in that I like the silhouette of everything. I
So do I.
The ombre effect, I'm not really sure of, but it's definitely interesting.
Yes, and I like ish. I almost like the way she wears her hair with the tiara. Um, I'm not really a fan of loose hair and tiaras, but this looks quite all right, actually.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Sam, on the orange?
Yeah, I'm not I am the jewelry expert. Don't ask me about dresses. It's all right, it's fine, yeah, it's great. But
Talking about jewelry, we can
I
see
I
the
wouldn't
base
go out
peeking
in
out
it,
again.
but it's fine. If if someone went, here's a dress, Sam, wear this, I'd go, okay, fair enough.
No, it was quite a run-of-the-mill kind of appearance for Sophia, nothing kind of too prominent. And then
Yeah.
we saw Princess Christina in the 4-button tiara, and this time we can see her medal
Oh yeah, we
properly.
see the medal.
Mm.
So no,
Yay.
she wore this lovely kind of she's worn this gown to the Nobels a few times before, the purple sequins, and it's quite a look. And I think she's the one who wears the button tiaras the best because they look really kind of lovely peeking out in her hair, and you can't
Mm,
Mm.
really see the ugly basis too much.
yeah,
So no, it's
maybe if
definitely
And
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 yes.
and no, just commenting on the hair that the sixth button was made for Lillian, and she had the same kind of hair. So that's probably why it suited her so well.
Oh yeah, no, that's one of those things. Like for those who know, Princess Christina's tiara got stolen a few years ago
Mm.
and thrown into a river and was never really found. I mean, in some less generous moments, I love Sophia's tiara, but I have a feeling that would be a good fate for her tiara as well, just so we might see other
don't be
tiaras.
mean.
Yes. I mean, she could get a replacement. It's not a whole old heirloom like Christina's tiara was, but it's definitely one of those pieces where I'm quite glad she doesn't have her tiara anymore in the sense that she can wear other pieces now and she looks really good in them. Yeah, so we were just discussing about Princess Sophia and how she's really been support behind the throne. And she's still going strong. She's about to be 80 next year and she's looking lovely as ever.
And it's nice to see her medal that's not tucked behind the sash. So it's you said it had brown brilliant cuts on it, Jacob?
Wait. I have my notes here. Let me just find them. Christina, where are you? Oh, here. It's the King's Medal of the 12th size with brilliance in a chain, a gold chain. So there are supposed to be some, do you say brilliance in English?
Brilliant cut, yeah, round cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are supposed to be some of them on the medal itself.
Mm,
Ooh, interesting.
okay.
But no, it's a very kind of special honor. And I mean, while we're on the topic of Princess Christina, she wrote a book recently on her grandmother, Crown Princess Margrethe, and she really became the family historian. And Jakob has shared some really lovely tidbits from that. I think it's only available in Swedish for now.
Yeah, unfortunately. And in that book, she dropped the bombshell that her grandmother, Crown Princess Margrethe, she left 7 tiaras in her will, and none of us have, and we can only think of 6.
And the 7th one was a big mystery one, which was worth the most out of all of them, but we could not kind of see which one that was because we already identified the rest of them.
Yeah,
So
and our friend Sarah Williams is constantly trying to get her will from the Royal Library, the National Library, but the king keeps extending the what do you call it, confidentiality
Potentiality
Yeah.
kind of term.
clause on, among other things, her will, which is a bit infuriating.
Yeah, I mean, you're lucky that they've been placed in the public archives to begin with, because as we all know, British royal wills are just never unsealed. So we will never know the true extent of Queen Mary's jewelry collection.
Ooh,
That's gotta hurt.
Oh, it does.
that is a tragedy
Oh.
there. I'm with you on that. And then kind of after the banquet, I didn't really see these pictures before, but Countess Madeline and Countess Bettina were both at the King's dinner as well, which I don't know about you, Jakob, but I've never really seen pictures of them at this banquet before. They're usually just at the
I've seen Bettina, and but what was noteworthy was that Madeline, she walked in behind the royals, in the same group.
And part of that procession, which is also a very rare honor in that sense.
But she is, from what I've heard, she's very close very close to her royal cousins in Sweden and the other countries.
She's always a lovely presence at all the royal events that we cover, and you can count on her to turn out looking absolutely classy and do a lovely job of it.
Yeah.
And then Countess Bettina was wearing, I think this is what is also in my mind is this cuffling tiara as well, but honestly I mix those two up so much that I cannot remember. But this is like
an intro about it if you want to hear.
Sure, go ahead.
Yes. The tiara, it's a bit puzzling, but the tiara was made and designed by her grandfather, Prince Wilhelm of Sweden, and he designed it for his daughter-in-law, Countess Karin Bernadotte, who was Bettina's father's first wife.
Yes.
Bettina is not descended from her, but he made it for her, for Karin and Lennart's silver wedding celebrations, and he placed it in her hair during the celebrations themselves. And the two of them were very, very close. They're even buried in the same burial plot. And the stones, at least some of the stones, are said to be ruby, which represents love, sapphire, which represents fidelity, and emerald, which represents hope.
It's quite a lovely kind of mix of stones.
Yes, and the fidelity part is quite ironic because they did get divorced. And he married Lennart later married Bettina. Well, he quickly married Bettina's mother, Sonja. But he must have gotten the tiara in the divorce settlement.
Yes. And just to add that this branch of the Swedish royal family, the Counts Bernadotte, they live on a spectacular island, I believe in Lake Constance, in Germany. And it was inherited from the Baden royal family by Bettina's father.
Yes.
So they have a lovely island which has a beautiful castle on it, but not the jewels to go along with it. Like we were discussing, her grandmother's jewels, the Romanov gems, they had to be sold sadly in the 20s.
Yes.
No, I was reading actually something about those jewels that her grandmother, Grandprincess Maria Pavlovna, she had smuggled them out of Russia, hidden inside prayer candles. So she had literally melted them inside the wax. And then after she sold emeralds to the king of Yugoslavia, and then the rest was jewels. But for her, the most tragic of the jewels sold were her mother's pearls, and her mother was Princess Alexandra of Greece, who was an aunt of the Duke of Edinburgh. So they're all just connected in that sense.
Yeah, and that's one of the most fantastic things about the Duke of Edinburgh, because he was so old and he died. What is it? 2 years ago?
Yes, almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, he died almost 2 years ago. And Alexandra, who was his first cousin, she died in like
1891.
1891. That's 130 years between them.
Which is just like,
and Prince what's his name?
Prince Michael of Greece.
Yeah, Prince Michael of Greece is still, he's a grandson of King George the First of Greece. He's still around.
Yeah.
He's still going.
Yeah, and like if you remember, like when like his grandparents and all of that, like he like it's all within his living memory. He met all these people, which is just amazing. No, they definitely like some of the royals are so well connected even to this day that it's just lovely to hear all the stories about them. Like we were talking about with Countess Madeline, who like is cousins to all those kings and queens, and if her father had married someone else, she would have probably been a princess or a queen herself somewhere.
Well, her father was one of the two Swedish princes who were basically given a one-way ticket to Amsterdam to marry Princess Juliana, and none of them took the ticket. No, none of them wanted the honor of marrying into the very, very, very conservative Dutch royal family, and
who were also very, very wealthy at the time.
Yes, and none of them wanted, from what I've heard, none of them were that much impressed by poor Juliana.
Oh, such a pity. We could have had a totally kind of different Dutch royal family now, if you think about that. Kind of also even more closely connected to the like the Scandinavian royals than it is now.
Yeah, and I mean, Juliana married Bernhard, and he was a mess. And the two Bernadotte princes, they were also a mess, both of them. So it wouldn't have made any difference to her.
And weren't they involved in some financial crises in the 50s?
That was the 50s and 60s. That was Prince Carl, who was Madeline's father.
Oh, yeah. So
And
no.
the other prince was Count Sigvard, who is the one that the king thought about the
ruby tiara.
Yeah, the ruby tiara.
So yeah, no, definitely. I mean, Juliana attracted a specific type of prince to her. No, I mean, also while we were on the subject of the two Bernadotte countesses, you mentioned Countess Karen Bernadotte, and I did an interesting article last year on a tiara she wore in the 1930s, which was almost identical to a tiara which the jeweler Andrew Prince found in an antique shop in London a few years ago, and then he put it on an actress who played Frida Dudley Ward, the mistress of King Edward VIII, for an episode of Downton Abbey. So it was like such a like interesting tangent from the Swedish royal family to Downton Abbey.
Yeah. And wasn't there a Norwegian tiara that was worn in? No, that wasn't Downton Abbey.
No, it's Maud of Fifes. Not Maud. Was it Maud? Princess Louise.
Well, technically it was Maud. Yes, Princess Louise's tiara. Which, funny enough, Princess Louise wore that tiara to the wedding of Margaret of Connaught and the Prince of Sweden. So it was like a whole kind of circle moment. Yeah. No, the Swedes really do a great effort with the Nobel Prizes and kind of dealing. I mean, it does brighten up everyone's December, in my opinion, and it's a really lovely way to end the year on a good kind of note. This is, however, not the last gala event of the Swedish royal family. On December 20th, they attend the Royal Academy kind of meeting in Stockholm, which,
The,
however,
for,
is
the
a
formal
white
gathering of the Swedish Academy.
Yes, perfect. And that formal gathering, it's a white tie event, but infuriatingly for some Swedish events, is not a tiara event. So the dress code is usually varied. There's a couple of diamond rivières, maybe an interesting pair of earrings, but usually quite kind of laid back.
But well, at least before COVID, that it was almost as if the royals were trying to up their jewelry game a bit for the formal gathering. It was as if they thought that let's wear as much as possible, but without tiaras.
Yeah, I think a couple of interesting brooches in their hairs a few times.
Yeah.
So for all of our listeners, that's something else to look forward to for the end of the year, which I mean, for those who know, the year ends on a good note with tiaras, and then it starts on an even better note with all the New Year's receptions that have tiaras themselves. So a lot to look forward to the next few weeks. Wonderful. So thank you so much, Jakob, for joining us today. We had a lovely conversation, and
Thank you
we
for having
really
me.
hope to have you back on again soon. Where can everyone find you on social media?
Oh yes. On Twitter, I'm called. What am I called? JAKREG76. And on Instagram, if Twitter decides to kick the bucket, my
Yeah.
name is 187 underscore CM. So 187 centimeters. And that's my height, nothing else. Um, so feel free to join me. Well, add me if you want. If you are a royal jeweler fan, I might have something to offer. And if you like Eurovision, I might have even more to offer.
Oh, I think I know. I've got some fans for you already.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.